Teletext, often known as broadcast teletext, is a standard that allows readers to display text and basic images on television sets that are equipped with the appropriate hardware. The data that is sent via teletext is concealed inside the broadcast signal, which is located in the vertical blanking interval region that is not visible at the top and bottom of the screen. The television's teletext decoder stores this information in a buffer in the form of a sequence of pages, with specific numbers assigned to each page. Through the use of their remote control, the user is able to show selected pages. Thus, keep watching this video to see the ascent and descent of teletext. What is teletext? In broad terms, it can be considered to be videotext, which is a system that delivers information to a user in a format similar to that of a computer. This information is typically displayed on a television or a dumb terminal. However, the term videotext is typically reserved for systems that provide communication in both directions, such as Prestel or Minitel. It was in the early 1970s in the United Kingdom when John Adams, who was the main designer for video display devices at Philips, came up with the idea for teletext. The CFAX service, which was first provided by the BBC in 1974, was the first of the major broadcasters in the United Kingdom to launch public teletext information services. It provided a variety of text-based information, which often included news, weather, and entertainment schedules for television. Additionally, information about paged subtitles, often known as closed captioning, was delivered as well, utilizing the same technology. In the years that followed, other television broadcasters in the United Kingdom and continental Europe implemented systems that were quite similar to the one that was first used. While this was going on, the General Post Office of the United Kingdom created the Prestel system, which used the same display standards as the send-only system used with TVs, but was operated via telephone lines using bidirectional modems. The World System Teletext Standard, also known as CCIR Teletext System B, is an expandable version of the original system. Teletext served as the foundation for this standard. Beginning in the 1980s, approximately all television sets in Europe were equipped with a decoder, which led to the broad adoption of this standard throughout the continent. But that's not all. Other standards were established all over the globe, the most notable of which were NA-BTS in the United States, Antiope in France, and JTs in Japan. However, these standards were never as popular as their European counterparts, and most of them were closed by the early 1990s. Furthermore, until far into the 2000s, the majority of European teletext services continued to function in some form or another. However, the proliferation of the Internet led to the shutdown of several of these services. On the other hand, a significant number of television stations in Europe continue to provide teletext services and even make teletext programming accessible via the web and specialized mobile applications. The rise of teletext. Through the use of one of the vertical blanking interval lines, which together constitute the black band that divides images horizontally on the television screen, teletext is a method that allows for the transmission of text and basic geometric forms to a television screen that is designed to receive them. There was not much difficulty involved in transmitting and displaying subtitles. A restricted bandwidth is required, and the pace of transmission is probably just a few words per second. On the other hand, it was discovered that even a sluggish data rate could be combined with an appropriate memory size in order to send and store whole pages of information on the television for later retrieval as needed. Work on the development of such a system was already underway in Britain at the beginning of the 1970s. The objective was to provide rural households in the United Kingdom with electronic gear that was capable of downloading pages of current news, reports, data, and numbers pertaining to agriculture in the United Kingdom. In the year 1970, Philips Cal Laboratories was the one who came up with the first concept. As already mentioned, Adams, an engineer at Cal, developed a concept and a proposal for broadcasters in the United Kingdom in 1971. His arrangement included all of the key components of traditional teletext, such as pages with 24 rows and 40 characters each, the ability to choose pages, information subpages, and the transfer of data at vertical blanking intervals. When Adams was in the process of developing the notion, one of his primary goals was to make teletext accessible to the average person who uses it in their house. Furthermore, it was not possible to create a teletext system that was economically viable with the technology that was available in 1971. On the other hand, this challenge needed to be conquered since the cheap cost was very important to the success of the project over the long run. In the meanwhile, the GPO, whose telecommunications section would eventually become British Telecom, had been doing research on a concept that was very similar to view data since the late 1960s. View data was a two-way system that took the use of telephones, in contrast to teledata, which was a one-way service that was conveyed in the current TV signal. Given that the post office was the owner of the telephones, this was seen as a good method for encouraging a greater number of consumers to make use of the computers. In 1972, the British Broadcasting Corporation presented their technology, which is now known as CFAX, on a number of different news programs. Oracle, which stands for Optional Reception of Announcements by Coded Line Electronics, was the name of the private service that was introduced by the Independent Television Authority in the year 1973. Thus, the government printing office did not want to be outdone, so they promptly launched a video text service with a rate of 1275 baud and called it Prestel. This system was based on Teletext protocols, but it was telephone-based. CFAX exhibited pages of 24 lines with 32 characters each, but Oracle gave pages of 22 lines with 40 characters each. Initially, the systems that were based on television broadcasting were incompatible with one another. There were additional areas in which the standards were similar. For example, both of them used 7-bit ASCII letters and other fundamental particulars. So, 1974 was the year when all of the services reached a consensus on a display standard for the information. A simple grid of text measuring 24 by 40 would be shown on the screen, along with a few graphical characters that would allow for the creation of basic visuals. As a result of the fact that the standard did not specify the distribution system, services that were similar to view data and teledata were able to at least share the TV-side hardware, which was fairly costly at the time. The downfall of teletext. From the late 1990s forward, the World Wide Web started to take over some of the duties that were formerly performed by teletext. Nevertheless, because of the broadcast nature of teletext, it continued to be a dependable source of information during times of crisis. For instance, after the attacks of September 11th, when the websites of major news sites were unavailable, owing to the enormous demand, teletext continued to be a reliable source of information. However, following the maturation of the web, some broadcasters discontinued the transmission of teletext, including CNN in 2006 and the BBC in 2012. Also, the arrival of digital television in the United Kingdom expedited the demise of teletext across the country. Nonetheless, closed captioning is still a kind of teletext that is still used today. Additionally, other nations continue to make extensive use of the technology for broadcasting standard definition digital video broadcasts. Those that broadcast internationally. The CNN International website does not yet provide a live teletext service. In spite of the fact that a great number of pages are still accessible, they have not been updated since October 31st, 2006. The United Kingdom. The British Broadcasting Corporation, which was the first company in the world to provide teletext services, discontinued its CFAX service in 2012 when the country switched to a completely digital television broadcasting system. Also, the British Broadcasting Corporation provides a red button service on digital television, which provides users with access to the most recent text news. This text news service may be accessed on the BBC News Channel and during BBC One program broadcasts. However, there are a great number of Sky stations that continue to transmit teletext subtitles, and it is possible that there are still a few sites that are live. However, the termination of analog teletext was observed in every area following the conclusion of analog transmissions. Legacy and successors. In spite of the fact that the fundamental structure of teletext has not changed in more than 3 decades, several enhancements and additions have been made over the years. A good illustration of this would be the digital version of teletext. To put it another way, when digital television became readily available, a number of nations began using the term digital teletext to refer to the more recent standards, despite the fact that the previous teletext standards were digital in nature. There are a number of standards that are used to encode digital teletext, including MHEG5 and Multimedia Home Platform. By virtue of the DVB-TXT and DVB-VBI substandards, other nations continue to make use of the identical teletext streams that were previously used on DVB broadcasts. These enable the reproduction of analog teletext on digital TV platforms, either directly on the television or set-top box or via reconstructing analog output and replicating the vertical blanking interval data that is used to carry teletext. But that is not all. In the United Kingdom, the information retrieval system known as Prestel was founded on teletext protocols. However, it was fundamentally a distinct system since it used a modem in conjunction with the phone system in order to send and receive the data. This system was analogous to systems such as Minitel, which functions in France. It was an asymmetric modem, with data being sent at 75 bits per second and received at 1200 bits per second. As opposed to the sequential rolling process used by TV-based systems, its two-way nature made it possible for pages to be provided immediately upon request. Additionally, it meant that a limited number of other services, such as the ability to book events or train tickets, as well as a limited amount of online banking, were included in the accessible options. Outro. And that wraps things up. We appreciate you taking the time to watch this video. Please hit the subscribe button and we'll see you in the next one.